Am I first making people better when they use it? I think there's a lot of technologies that actually fail that test right away. And I know this is very opinionated, but I think a lot of social media fails that test.
Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, where we explore how leaders can spark more human-centric organizations while still achieving meaningful business outcomes. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Vivienne Ming, a theoretical neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and one of the most original thinkers at the intersection of AI, human potential, and inclusion. She's the co-founder of Sokos Lab, where she applies machine learning and cognitive science to solve real-world challenges, from education and healthcare to workforce development. Vivienne's not just asking what AI can do, she's focused on what it should do to help people thrive. Her work is bold, human-centered, and deeply values-driven. We're going to talk about designing AI that amplifies people, embracing neurodiversity, and what it means to lead with empathy in an increasingly automated world. Vivienne, welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad we had this chance to have a conversation.
Awesome. Now, you've described yourself, and I love this, as a professional mad scientist, demented author, and inventive storyteller. Those are powerful, playful identities. But at their core, they suggest a deep curiosity about human potential. What drew you to the work you're doing?
Well, gosh, that is a long story. One that probably will be a book someday, I imagine. It's, first off, even the nature of those words, or the pairs of words, demented storyteller and delusional, and, I like making fun of myself. It's easy, given the work that I do, to sort of believe your own press and think of yourself as a hero. I think, boy, the world would be a lot better place if some notable tech executives had a lot more humility. Well, I got that in spades, because while I was supposed to be this amazing person when I was born, and I certainly had my strengths, I actually ended up homeless and spent a good chunk of the 90s with a life I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And so the chance to do that all over again, lead almost a completely different life, and to have that life centered around how do I make other people's lives better is, there's just a fundamental tension. I deeply believe in the work that I do, and it would be absurd to take myself too seriously, because I know what it's like to know where your next meal is coming from. And I'm uncomfortable with that tension. Just living in the dissonance of that is, I think, better than trying to craft one single holistic story that explains everything. Plus, I like a good joke, and recognizing I probably look like a mad scientist to the rest of the world. So why don't I just lean into that?
Wow, so that's an amazing story. What ended up having the vaulting you into this new role after you were facing such difficult times?
It would be great if there were a super easy answer to that. I could go on Good Morning America and just say, hey, this one magic moment happened. And certainly there were moments I can talk about. There's a night in 1995 when I didn't pull a trigger on a gun and end my life, which is a pretty dark moment to have, to know what that feels like. There is the moment of realizing maybe I'm never going to be happy. And wonderful that turned out to not be true. But realizing that doesn't have to be the only reason to be alive. Maybe I can find some other way. And so I like to believe that the value of this part of my story is it took a long time to figure all of this out. There's the downward slope, but then there was this 10 years where first I climbed back out of that hole, and then suddenly everything was amazing. I went back to university, same school I'd flunked out of, did my whole undergraduate in a single year, got perfect grades in every course, went on to fancy smancy grad school stuff. And in all of that time, I still felt like a failure. I still felt like that person who had failed to achieve anything in their lives. The difference being, I kept moving forward. I kept saying it doesn't matter that I feel this way. It doesn't matter that I didn't win a Nobel Prize in my Introduction to Programming course. I'm still doing something worthwhile. And as long as that's why I'm doing it, instead of the accolades, I can move forward, even if it doesn't feel great inside. The wonderful thing is the punchline of the whole story is eventually it does feel good. When you get to invent something that literally saves someone's life, or even just get in front of a crowd on a stage and get everyone to laugh at the same time, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, eventually life gives you gifts back.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm so glad. And I think the world is so happy to have you on this side of that
I'm pretty happy about it too at this point. Awesome. Finally.
So if you could rewind to when you were just getting started on this side of your career, when you went back to school, what would you surprise that younger version of you most about the work you're doing now?
I mean, some of it is something I've certainly have learned even more so as an entrepreneur than as a scientist, is life is fundamentally imperfect. When I was a kid, I thought I was supposed to be perfect. Again, from the youngest of age, I was supposed to win Nobel Prizes, and every moment I didn't felt like a failure. When later I realized all I needed to do was sit in the front of the class and think to myself, how can I use this? How can I use it? How can I use it? How can I make other people's lives better? As absurd as that sounds, as sort of as grandiose as that sounds, in a very practical way. And wow, was that a transformation? You know, to be an undergraduate student sitting in the front of the class and having these rich conversations with my professors, because I can now say, you know, in retrospect, having done this myself now, the chance to have a true conversation with someone who is hungry to learn, even if they're wrong about everything. In fact, one of my favorite findings in my own research I got to publish with my wife was we built an AI that analyzed student conversations and predicted the grade they would get later in the course, which I don't care what grade they get, but what we wanted to do was say, hey, teachers, here's something you can do right now today that would change that outcome for the better. But in that original work, what we found is it was actually the students that explored and made mistakes that our AI predicted would actually do better later in their career. And when I dispensed with that idea that I had to be perfect and I had to get perfect grades and I had to win awards and it was not okay to make mistakes, it was required to explore. Suddenly, it was also easy. I took 7 courses a quarter. My university was on a quarter system, 7 courses a quarter plus 2 research projects every quarter, and then an honors thesis. I will, frankly, an absurd load. But it was also easy. It just, first off, compared to being homeless, that felt easy. The stress, you know, was lower, but also intellectually, all this stuff came together because I was using it. I wasn't just trying to get a score on a test. The paradox being, of course, then I got these amazing scores. Then I had all this academic success that I'd never had the first time through. So that would be one of those things. And when I was able to take that later into my research career and then my entrepreneurial career, one of the best pieces of advice I think I didn't personally receive, it was just out there in the zeitgeist, was if you aren't embarrassed when you first release your product, you waited too long.
Oh, I love that.
So that was a big part of it, was just coming to terms with this fact, you know what? I need to be able to step up in public and admit when I'm wrong on a regular basis and just get comfortable with that, even though there's a part of me still today that hates it, that just wants to crawl under the bed and hide, but I don't let them make my decisions for me.
Well, Vivienne, I want to say, from my perspective, and we've sort of only been talking a little bit, you are perfectly imperfect. And it feels like that's what we all have to get our arms around, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, another thing that I learned early in my entrepreneurial career when we were going out and pitching venture capitalists on educational technology. I mean, all of this is sort of AI in education, AI in HR tech and healthcare, is what can I control? Maybe the person on the other side of the table isn't getting it. You know, my co-founders and I could walk away from a meeting feeling like that guy wasn't interested in getting it. He didn't get it. And let's just be clear, it's almost always a guy. I wish that wasn't true, but that's the world. Maybe he's just too dumb. Boy, that feels very satisfying to say that. To which I really quickly learned, well, then why did I waste my time? What do I control? I control the choice of having set that meeting up. So why did I do it? Why didn't I find someone who was smart enough to get it? If in fact that was the issue. And, you know, it's not that that's never the case, but really, what can I do to make myself successful? I am my own raw materials. Make the most of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this podcast is about inspiring and empowering leaders to make organizations more human at scale. How do you think technology, especially AI, fits into that mission?
Here's where my story gets even messier or more complicated. Again, it'd be so nice to say technology is fundamentally human or dehumanizing, or it's attention. You know, some of my classic lines about technology are technology is invariably inequality increasing because the people who need it the least are the ones who end up benefiting the most. Not because of technology, but because of humanity. You know, I have this privileged background despite the hardships of my life. Of course I'm better able to make use of AI. Oh, and I literally build the stuff myself. So when a new tool comes out, I benefit enormously. The average human being, not very much. That's just the way this stuff works. But even more important to me is owning the following idea. If I build a new technology, am I first making people better when they use it? I think there's a lot of technologies that actually fail that test right away. And I know this is very opinionated, but I think a lot of social media fails that test. Doesn't have to, but in practice it does. But here's my actual test. Even for the technology that makes us better when we use it, am I better than when I started when I turn it off again? And this is really important to me because some of the technologies I build are scary. I build neurotechnologies, things that actually interact with your brain. You don't want me building a technology to do something in your brain you can already do for yourself. Because if I do that, then that part of your brain will wither away. If it does all the hard memorization for you, if it somehow does all of the math calculations, then the actual biological parts of your brain, let's just be super clear, imagining we could achieve that level of cyber technology right now, then the actual parts of your brain that do it right now would essentially wither and disappear. So I can't do that. It violates a do no harm. But that not only in neurotechnologies. If I actually challenge, I teach one lecture a year still at Berkeley, and it's for an engineering entrepreneurship course. All these brilliant young engineers at UC Berkeley want to take their inventions out into the world. And I give them that challenge. Will your technology not only make people better when they're using it, will they be better than where they started when they turn it off again? And my go-to example here is Google Maps, automated navigation. I use it all over the world. Go to new cities on a regular basis, and no matter where I am, I know how to get where I need to go. That's great. But I had this prediction years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I said, within 10 years, we will see a statistically significant increase in early onset dementia, and it will be causally because of the use of automated navigation. This one thing we neuroscientists know about good cognitive health is navigating through space is part of it. And now we don't have to do that anymore. So in my class, I challenge my students, either think about your own technology or use this example. How would you redesign it? So I not only get to my hotel in Paris, but I'm actually better when I arrive than when I landed on the plane. And that's a real challenge, I think, to a lot of young innovators and entrepreneurs and managers to really own that level of the problem, the whole problem, not just the nerdy technology part, but the human part as well.
I love that. So what are some of the best answers that people came up with to how you might improve on the GPS to make you better after you use it?
So I like two in particular, and I will say one of them is mine. The first one is a technology solution, building a model of you. And the idea here is I land at Charles de Gaulle, I get into the city center, and I tell Google, hey, I'm going to my hotel. It simply responds, got it, check, and that's it. There's no map, there's no directions, there's nothing. And I start wandering. And if in my wandering I reach the hotel, I never interact with Google at all. But let's say I'm going through the old city center. If you've ever been in these medieval, they're like windy mazes, and I get turned around, I'm headed in the wrong direction. Now that model of me has predicted I'm not going to arrive, at least not within the time frame. But even then, it doesn't give me directions. Instead, I get a text message, and it simply says, hey, Vivienne, where's the Eiffel Tower? And I say, oh, damn. And now we're literally leveraging neuroscience about the brain, about learning, about cognitive health. I just realigned the place cells in my hippocampus by suddenly shifting my worldview and realizing my map of the world was completely wrong. I've actually learned through the experience. And I'm also now headed in the right direction again. So that's one, a deeply technological experience that requires artificial intelligence. It requires a lot of sophistication. But I'm a nerd. I love that. Here's a super human one. First, I got to get to my hotel. Google, give me the directions. All right. Now my challenge to you is beat Google's directions. So you can use this in your own home. Like I'm headed to the supermarket. I check Google just to know if there's an accident or a street is blocked, and it gives me the best route. And then I think to myself, what do I know about Berkeley or San Francisco? Or frankly, I do travel a lot, so about Paris. What do I think I uniquely know that can get me there before Google? Because now I'm thinking about it. I'm going deep rather than shallow. And if I wanted something, if we want to know how to humanize technology, think, is this technology getting its user to go deep? Are they thinking hard? Are they engaging? Or it's shallow? Is it just making it easier for them? If it's just making life easier, hey, there are times when that's not a bad idea. But if that's all it's doing, think hard. Is this truly the product I want to release into the world, or service, or whatever it is your company's engaged with?
That's great. Now, just for our audience, to understand what Vivienne does and the types of things she does, her LinkedIn profile, part of it says this: in her free time, Vivienne has invented AI systems to help treat her diabetic son, predict manic episodes in bipolar sufferers weeks in advance, and reunite orphan refugees with extended family members. So what I was going to ask you is, to be honest, do you also bake sourdough, run marathons, and solve climate change on weekends? But we'll put that aside, because I'm sure you do. But what I really want to know is, of all the things that you've done, the application of technology, can you give us a sense of where you've taken that, your own advice, and sort of adjusted the technology to ensure that it made the person better when it was turned off?
I'm going to answer your question But very annoyingly, I'm going to get at the first thing you brought up first. I love a good sourdough. But actually, what I do for fun, other than the fact that I truly love what I get to do, helping people is addictive. And that's my day job. But I write science fiction and fantasy. And what's interesting is my research and the research of many others shows when you look at people, not me, but people that do win Nobel Prizes and found billion-dollar companies and win Booker Awards and all of these sorts of major accomplishments, they are more likely than the average person to have, avocations, to have hobbies and crafts. But what's interesting is it's not the classic story. If you're a parent and you're trying to get your child to pack their college transcript with first chair violin and math camp and tap dance and, whatever it might be, note that that sort of thing doesn't predict astonishing long-term life outcomes. It's people whose passions are real, like my nerdy passion for building technology, particularly artificial intelligence and neurotechnologies. It wouldn't surprise you then to know that the screenplay I'm working on is about neurotechnologies. And the fantasy series that I'm writing plays with some of the theories of artificial intelligence, but in a fantasy context. So it's not arbitrary. I'm taking my passions and expressing it throughout my life and my career. So that's one of the ways that I make it so easy to make all of this a part of my life. Instead of seeking work-life balance, I lean in. I'm looking for work-life synergy. I want it all to fit together. And that includes my family and my kids. Having said all of that, back to your true question, a lot of my work starts in the philanthropic side. My current company, Dionysus Health, has developed the first ever biological test for postpartum depression. I'm immensely proud of that. It's the only blood test in the world for a mental health disorder. And let me tell you, if any of you are a mom and you've ever struggled with depression, it literally is not just in your head. We can see it in your epigenome, the part of your genetic structure that is changed by the environment, by your own body. We can see it before you ever experience the symptoms. Well, that started during the pandemic with my co-founder and I just doing a philanthropic project. We wanted to understand how our bodies, genetics, hormones, brain activity, behavior, everything relates to suicide risk. Purely because it was worth understanding. Because we wanted to do something that could make a difference in the world. And some of that work lives on in pure philanthropy, my nonprofit, the Human Trust. But this one specific finding, combined with amazing clinical work from our clinical team, found that, wow, there's this specific thing, epigenetics, that predicts what turned out to be the most common complication in pregnancy, postpartum depression. It's not preeclampsia. It's not necessarily preterm birth. It is this biologically identifiable form of depression. And for the first time ever, you can be screened for it before you've ever given birth. So again, I'm immensely proud, but the way I make certain my work stays in this human domain is it all starts with me paying for everything. People bring me a problem. Dr. Ming, my daughter has 500 seizures a day. Please save her life. Dr. Ming, our country does everything the World Bank says. Our students' test scores go up every year. Still no one hires our citizens. Please help. Or in this case, I just run into an interesting person at a conference at MIT and we launched this little project because it feels like it should happen. And if I think my team and I can make a difference, I pay for everything. And whatever we invent, we give away. So then I know this matters so much to me. I'd be willing to do it all by myself and pay for everything myself, even if no one ever knew that it happened. And if every now and then that project has legs and the right place for it to live, as in this case, is, you know, as a company, that's great. If the right place is that we publish some science papers or we build a philanthropic project and give it away, as I've done with a lot of my education work, all of that is a win to me. In fact, even showing, oh, what we thought would work here doesn't work. That's too bad, but now we've learned. We write a little paper about it, and now some good thing has come out of that. All of these are wins for me. But it starts with me owning the whole problem. So much so that I'm taking all of the risk.
Cool. Well, I have to ask, what are you excited about now? You have all these projects. What's in the hopper that has you getting up early in the morning going, this is the thing that's going to make me so happy that I'm helping people with?
So I've got 4 big projects. We just chatted about one, which is Dionysus's work in postpartum depression. Next up for us is perimenopausal depression. Even more women, probably related to why women have more rates of Alzheimer's than men, higher rates. So that's our big next project there. My other company is Optoceutics. We're working in Alzheimer's itself with a direct neurotechnology that literally stimulates your brain and has these amazing positive impacts. And I have to say, with all the cuts in funding for research in the US government, I'm going to be real blunt. This is going to hit women's health harder than everyone else. I'm proud that I have 2 companies working in women's health and that we have a chance to empower women to take advantage of it. Outside of those companies, I'm writing a book, or actually I've already written one. It's called How to Robot Proof Your Kids. It comes out later this year. Even that, I wanted to explore my own thinking. After 25 years of working with AI, what did I have to say uniquely, different than anyone else? And get that down in a form that is also uniquely me, not just your typical, here's how AI works, here's what corporate America ought to do about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the whole thing, with lots of personal stories. And then the last one is my latest big philanthropic project. At the Human Trust, we're working on a few different projects. One using AI to help do role modeling for kids rather than other approaches. We're looking at one for suicide prevention, but it chats with the call center workers rather than people in crisis. But here's the big one. We're building a biobank, taking all this epigenetic data and behavioral data together so that we can take that information today and say, hey, why don't you take an extra walk on Thursdays? Why don't you maybe once a week substitute a little eggplant for your steak? We're looking at wellness, but by having this biological underpinning, we're actually preventing 20 years from now, 30 years from now, ischemic heart disease, breast cancer rates, Alzheimer's rates. We want to turn public health into what we are paradoxically calling precision public health. How can we target each individual American with a unique recommendation that will improve their well-being today, but what we're secretly doing is dramatically changing their health outcomes 30 years from now?
If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We've got plenty more great stories coming your way. That's amazing. You're doing wonderful work. And I want to sort of shift from the work you're doing to the learnings you've had about how technology and AI can be used, especially for a lot of the listeners are leaders of organizations. And you've said AI isn't about replacing us, it's about understanding us better. What advice do you have for leaders in terms of how they might use AI to make sure that it actually, like you said, is better for people and that it doesn't actually just deteriorate how an organization deals with human beings?
One of the most important lessons I could share is there is no AI will do X. You have a choice. You're a leader. How you choose personally or at the level of your organization to engage with AI determines how it will affect your company. There isn't one magic way that this is going to play out. So here's a choice. Human beings are very expensive. In fact, the costliest human beings, trying to hire someone like me, is immensely expensive. Wouldn't it be great if you had GPT or Gemini or Claude replace those costly human beings? And interestingly enough, this turns the classic story on its head. It's not, the truck drivers and the field workers that are going to be out of jobs. Because the brutal truth is they'll just work for less. It's real embodied robots are expensive. They're hard to make. If they cost X, then humans will work for 99% of X until they're working for virtually nothing. Brutal, but true. So instead, the sweet spot is, all right, it might be hard to reproduce Vivienne in an AI, and God, why would anyone want to do that? But if we aim for a step lower, where are the incredibly expensive parts of your company that are very sophisticated, but also very routine? Reading a contract, writing some boilerplate computer code, analyzing some medical imaging. Run through the list of places where there are not enough people. It takes years to know how to do it, but there's a lot of data. And all of those are AI sweet spots for what an economist would call substitution. Just have an AI do it instead of a human being. More likely what we'll see is what I call deprofessionalization. All right, we're not going to actually get rid of all the human beings, but instead of hiring a doctor or a lawyer or a software engineer, we're going to hire someone with a high school degree, and they're going to walk an AI around the room. So we're going to get the Jiffy Lube economy. Hey, it's great. Jiffy Lube is so much more expensive than going to your mechanic was back in the day. But boy, I hope you only need what their automated system can deliver, because that's all they can do for you. So that's one set of choices. We're going to use AI to substitute and deprofessionalize, save a ton of money today, probably see productivity gains. Or maybe not, because we have about as many people employed. It's messy. Here's another choice you can make. Complementarity. But I'm going to take it further. Creative complementarity. All right, I've got these very expensive people that do these routine tasks, but is that all they do? When I hire an elite lawyer to read a contract, I'm not just asking them to find all the flaws and tell me the case history. I'm asking them to tell me what I should do about it. Possibly what I should do that's different than any other client they might have. In which case, now they're not exploring the known world, the routine. They're exploring the unknown. The way I talk about this in my book is the difference between well-posed problems that have explicitly right and wrong answers and ill-posed problems that don't even have good questions. The uniquely human strength in the modern world is exploring those ill-posed problems. We're terrible at it, but we're still vastly better than AI. And if you truly want to leverage the potential that AI has, not to just do what you've been doing all this time, but for less money, but instead truly see explosive growth. And I'm not pulling this out of a hat. We can get into some of the research here, but truly looking at explosive growth, particularly in design, innovation, the creative spaces. But I mean engineering innovation, material sciences, proteomics. It is so exciting, but it is not asking an LLM to write your emails for you. It is using AI that has been explicitly designed to support human beings exploring the unknown. And in that research literature, the results aren't software developers with little experience write 20% more lines of code. The result is elite scientists patent 40% more groundbreaking discoveries and lift productivity, not of themselves, of the entire company by similar amounts. So this is huge gains, company-wide. That's a choice. One requires a massive cultural shift, a real shift in how you lead people, and it's a longer-term return. The other one is essentially a cost-cutting measure, and so you get your returns on day one, but the gains in the long term They just won't be there. So obviously, I'm loading the question here. You know which choice I'm advocating for. But most people are choosing deprofessionalization, which you could see it as a kind of dark choice that we're making, but it's also an opportunity. Pretty soon, all of your competitors are going to be getting the exact same answer from GPT. Here's your opportunity to come up with your own answer to the problem that not only benefits from what GPT knows, but then is taken the next step by what your elite human innovation can deliver.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that leaders sort of have those two options and sort of lead in one of those two ways today. You get leaders who are cutting costs to drive profitability, and you have leaders who are trying to drive innovation, to drive growth, to drive profitability. So we see that same, I think, dichotomy in leaders today. Now, as you throw AI into that mix, and like you said, there are distinct ways you can use it, but in both ways, there's some question about how do you manage or control for ethics when you're offloading things to an AI engine. What's your thought on either ethical guardrails or things we should be thinking about in terms of ethics?
A great many things. I have a slightly heterodox attitude about this, which is to say there's a whole field of AI ethics, and there are norms in this space, reweighting data sets, making certain data people are well represented in your data, having checklists. All of these are reasonable things, none of which makes AI more ethical, unfortunately. One of my companies long ago, Guild, I was the chief scientist. We built one of the first AI systems for hiring. And one of the things we built and really pioneered, not the scientific concept, but putting it in a product, was explainability. Our system said why it was recommending this candidate and why for your company. We were so proud of that. It even pre-templated a letter that you could then finish and sign that was essentially, hey, candidate, here's why you should come work for us. No one ever read those explanations, and no one made use of those letters. Despite the fact that that's what our customers responded to. When we did pilots and market research, they were blown away by the idea. But that's not actually part of recruiters' workflow. Like, they're used to spamming 5,000 people a day and then hoping to hear back from a tiny number. This was completely different. Okay, so not all of ours, there's this sort of elite 20% that really lean into these new tools. But frankly, even they didn't really make use of the explainability details, which was supposed to be, and still today, a crucial ingredient in AI ethics. Well, if your users never read the explanations, what have you changed? So that's my problem. As someone who's been doing this for a long time with a lot of traditional approaches to AI ethics, they are genuinely well-intentioned and theoretically informed and practically useless. Day to day, why do AI projects go off the rails and cause problems? Because the people building the AI, that's all they're doing. In other words, their job is to build the most sophisticated AI they can. When Amazon tried to recruit me to be their chief scientist years ago, and one of the projects they were working on was an AI for hiring, for which I had some of the unique experience in the world at that moment, I told them the thing they were building wouldn't work. Why wouldn't it work? Because they'd hired a bunch of brilliant young men to just do what they were told. Take all of Amazon's hiring history, build a deep neural network, predict who would get a promotion in their first year at Amazon. Well, in 30 years, forget the perfect data set with all the right answers. I've never even been given the right question. So the first thing those brilliant young men should have done is said to their bosses, are we sure that promotion your first year at Amazon is the right question? And it turns out it isn't, because the single biggest correlation with that is being a man. Even though That has nothing to do with how good you are at your job. So nothing Amazon could do could get the gender bias out of their AI. They did everything AI ethics said, and still their AI wouldn't hire women. To their credit, they never released this publicly. They disclosed it and talked about their challenges. All of this, I think, is great, but it shows just doing what these sort of long-bearded philosophy majors tell you to do doesn't magically make your problems go away. Instead, what we really need, and needed back then, was for those, not just young men, to be trained in how to solve problems instead of how to build AI. AI is a tool. One of the benefits of my career is I was never a computer scientist. My PhDs are in psychology and computational neuroscience. AI was a tool. I wanted to understand people. Yeah, I can nerd out about it, but for me, it's fundamentally an astonishing, groundbreaking tool, maybe one of the most powerful tools ever developed, but still just a tool for understanding humans. So if you want to do ethical work with AI inside your companies, the starting point is you and your team need to be owning the whole problem. You need to start with, is this the right question to ask? And I know that comes up a lot in sort of philosophy of management, but I mean it in such a grounded way here, because the question literally gets translated into math, into a cost function. Your AI takes that question and implements it as a rule for how to behave. If you haven't asked the right question, your AI will go off the deep end and do terrible things, whether you wanted it to or not. AI doesn't understand anything. This is what's amazing about AI in the modern world. It almost literally knows everything. It understands nothing. The understanding comes from you. If you don't know how to problem solve and ask the right questions, AI is not going to save you.
Brilliant. I love the way you frame that. That AI is going to replicate into the future what it has seen in the past, right? And that was the issue with the males, right? It learns from the past without the nuances to understand how it wants the future to be different. And I think that gets into your questioning, right? We have to say what we want in terms of how we want to see the future different from what we saw in the past.
Which is one reason why, at a technical level, training AIs to answer multiple questions at the same time often makes them perform a little bit better, because now they're not just trying to optimize one single ill-chosen question, they're working across a lot. And in my work, for example, all of this work I've talked about looking at long-term life outcomes, we don't just pick one. We're not just looking at whether you get cancer. We're not just looking at how much money you make. I look at over 24 different life outcomes: lifetime income, lifetime wealth, all-cause mortality, insulin sensitivity, central body mass, psychological well-being, social connectedness, walking speed at age 65. Why pick one thing? You're trying to solve a truly complicated human problem. What you're really doing, you're working with an ecology. You know, this is as complicated as going in, like the classic stories of Australia. Well, unfortunately, these rats showed up. So we brought in the cats to eat the rats, and we brought in bullfrogs and then rabbits. And every time you try to fix the ecology, it gets worse and worse and worse, because these are complicated dynamical systems. Well, guess what? Every single human being is an ecology unto themselves. And then they're an ecology inside an ecology when you put them inside an organization, a community, a culture. Respect that. Respect that the chance, no matter how smart you are, or how smart the world tells you that you are never smart enough to outsmart reality. So be modest. Pick very targeted things you're trying to change, things you think you might understand. Start with the assumption that you don't. Even with that simple problem, really go novice mind on it. Ask classic, like my favorite is why? Do a classic why exercise deep into every problem you're working on, even if you think you understand it. There are a few problems I've worked on in my career where our understanding stood up to it. Some of it is peculiar to me, right? No one comes to me for help first. That mom with the child with epilepsy, 500 seizures a day, they had doctors. I'm not an MD. I'm the fake doctor. So why did they come to me? Well, that in a weird way makes my job easier. If someone comes to me, it's because nothing else worked. Let's just start with that assumption and go from there.
We've talked about a lot of things, but I'd love to start wrapping up with just your looking to the future. What gives you hope right now when you think about the future of humanity and technology?
Now could be a really bleak moment. I have reasons to be particularly unhappy with the state of my government at this moment and what it says about society, that we think it's okay to marginalize people. But that's also where I get hope from. People can change. Everyone can change. If there's a story from my life, it is, short of ending your life, you can always come back and do something good. And a complicated part of this story is we're never one person. We think we are. We have this idea that we're one person. In one of my research projects, I won't go into it in detail, we found that these amazing, highly educated, ambitious people would say, I would never do that. It was ethically wrong. And then we could engineer scenarios, invariably, 100%. We could engineer scenarios in which they would do the very thing they said was wrong. They're both of those people at the same time. I think it's better for us to respect the fact that we're not bad because we're flawed. Being flawed just means we're human. It's refusing to acknowledge it. It's refusing to do something about it. So if I look out at the world right now and I feel like, wow, there are a lot of flawed human beings out there and they want to be lied to. And they're willing to have the worst version of themselves take the steering wheel for the moment. It's like Severance, except, the bad version of themselves is in charge. But that good version of you is in there also. And here's the closing thought there. If you want to be the person you believe you are, all you have to do is practice being that person. If that person you want to be is courageous, if they stand up and be counted when the world truly needs them to be, my recommendation to you is practice being courageous when it's easy. Start with small things and practice it. Then when the world gets hard, when someone comes to you with a deal you can't refuse, you're going to be ready to be that better version of yourself. And that will always win out over, I'm just naturally the best version of me all the time. That self-awareness and that recognition that being flawed, it doesn't make you a villain. It just makes you human.
That's great. I'm going to end with the 3 questions I ask at the end of all of my podcasts. The first one is, if you could pick one leadership skill that will be even more important in the future, what would it be?
Even more important in the future to me is perspective taking, related to theory of mind. Being able to understand why other people feel that the way they feel in the moment. You can use it in a million ways, but people rich in perspective taking have better long-term life outcomes, but they also are able to lead others towards being a better version of themselves.
Cool. And I also like to give my guests a magic wand for a small period of time. And if you could change one thing that would make organizations more human-centric, what would it be?
I did a big old research study with a giant company, 430,000 person. They said, what is the single biggest predictor of productivity inside our company that we're not tracking? And it was purpose. So if I could wave a magic wand, and purpose from a psychological perspective means you have something in your life that's bigger than you, something it takes more than a lifetime to complete. Not the company's purpose, not what's in the handbook or written up on the walls. Your meaning for being alive. companies, communities that create space for people to find purpose in their work, it is dramatically unleashing. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be trust your employees to create meaning out of their work. Don't force them to do stuff that they loathe just to earn that paycheck. It will genuinely pay for itself.
Awesome. And the last question is, for leaders who are inspired by your work, what's one final piece of advice you'd like to leave with them?
Well, obviously, it's buy How to Robot Proof Your Kids when it comes out. But if I could give you one piece of advice, you don't have to be perfect. And again, I'm saying this as a scientist. One of the most interesting findings I had, a data set of 122 million people. And we looked not at what separates the very best from the very worst, what separates the very, very best from the people just below it. It turns out not being perfect. Everyone has flaws. The best performers in the world have flaws, leaders and otherwise. The difference was they were aware of their own weaknesses and they developed compensatory strategies that helped them deal with them. That's what was different between the Nobel Prize equivalents of history and the almost rans. Engage with your weaknesses. Admitting that they're there doesn't make you broken. Instead, engage with them and come up with strategies that compensate. And one of the best is find people that complement your weaknesses, that have strengths where you need it, and work with them. But that's not the only strategy out there. So be open and honest with yourself about where you need help.
I love that. I feel like we're ending sort of where we started, which is embracing your perfect imperfectionist.
Yes.
Thank you, Vivienne. This has been unbelievable. I really, truly enjoyed the discussion.
It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you found my conversation with Vivienne as insightful, thought-provoking as I did. Her work reminds us innovation isn't just about technology, it's about people. Leading in an AI world means putting humanity first and building legacies that matter. If this resonated with you, share it with other leaders who are navigating these same questions, and subscribe for more conversations on humanity-centric leadership in today's fast-moving world. Now let's move into the after show, where I'll reflect on key takeaways and explore how leaders can apply these ideas to foster innovation with empathy and purpose. Welcome to the after show. What an incredible conversation. Vivienne Ming doesn't just push boundaries. She lives in the space where boundaries disappear altogether. I'm still processing everything we covered, but let me walk through 5 powerful insights that really stood out and offer some thoughts on how leaders can bring them to life. The first is that growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from purpose, especially when you've seen the bottom. Vivienne's personal story is as raw and real as it gets. In the 90s, she was homeless and battling despair. She talked openly about a night when she nearly took her own life, and yet somehow she began to rebuild, not in a flash of inspiration, but through small, steady choices to keep moving forward. What changed everything? A shift in mindset. She just described how, instead of asking how to succeed, she started asking, how can I use this to help someone else? That question became her compass. Leaders often feel the need to project perfection, but Vivienne's story reminds us trying to look flawless can keep us stuck. Instead, when we let purpose guide us, when we choose usefulness over ego, we open up new paths forward, even in the darkest moments. The second idea was that technology should make us better after we use them. Vivienne offered a challenge that should stick with every leader working with tech. Am I better than when I started when I turn it off again? She used GPS as a metaphor. It's convenient, but over time, it may actually dull a part of our brain tied to memory and navigation. This is a provocative lens for evaluating the tools we build or bring into our organizations. Are they just making tasks easier, or are they strengthening the people using them? Are we designing for convenience or for capability? Vivienne's version of ethical tech is clear. It should elevate us, not just during use, but long after. The third insight is that we should embrace human complexity. People aren't problems to solve, they're ecologies to support. I love how Vivienne put it. Every human being is an ecology unto themselves. That framing flips traditional management on its head. Too often we reduce people to metrics, productivity, engagement scores, performance ratings. But people are deeply layered, interconnected systems. Vivienne builds AI models that factor in dozens of long-term outcomes: health, well-being, financial security, social connection, because that's how real life works. As leaders, we need to operate with that same humility. We're not managing tasks, we're nurturing systems. So how might we be different if we viewed each person not as a unit of labor, but as a living, evolving ecosystem? The fourth insight is that the best leaders aren't flawless, they're self-aware. Vivienne's research uncovered something fascinating. The highest achievers weren't perfect, but they knew where they struggled and developed strategies to work around it. Everyone has flaws, she said, but the difference was they were aware of them. That's such a practical insight for leaders. You don't need to fix every weakness. You need to know it's there and design accordingly. Maybe that means building a team that complements you. Maybe it's setting up structures that account for blind spots. Either way, self-awareness becomes your superpower. Now, the final insight is that you have a choice. AI as a cost cutter or as a creativity catalyst. Vivienne laid out a clear choice. Use AI to cut costs and deprofessionalize, or use it to amplify human creativity. One path gives short-term returns. The other builds long-term value through innovation, uniqueness, and deeper engagement. She described it as the difference between solving routine problems and exploring unknown ones. That's where humans still shine. But organizations need to design for that, build cultures that reward exploration, not just efficiency. And as she warned, pretty soon, everyone's AI will be delivering the same answers. The opportunity isn't in getting faster answers. It's in asking better, bolder questions. Vivienne Ming reminded us that innovation isn't just about what we build. It's about who we become in the process. Her work calls us to lead with empathy, curiosity, and courage, to ask not just what can we do, but who are we helping become better in the process. Thanks for joining me for the after show. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.